Every powerful person in the city gathered at one exclusive gala, dressed in designer suits and dripping in diamonds, all waiting for one man, a self-made black billionaire CEO. But when the grand doors swung open, the man who stepped inside was not wearing a tailored tuxedo. He was wearing a torn, filthy brown suit with ripped sleeves, stained fabric, and the exhausted face of someone the world had forgotten. And in less than 60 seconds, every smile in that room disappeared, replaced by something ugly that no amount of wealth could hide. He was laughed at to his face, called names he never deserved. Grown men in expensive watches looked at him with pure disgust, and women in evening gowns physically stepped away from him as if poverty were a disease. Not a single person in a room full of millionaires offered him even a glass of water. But in the back of that ballroom, one waitress was watching everything. She was not rich, she was not powerful, she was simply a hardworking woman trying to survive her shift. And yet she did something that every millionaire in that room was too heartless to do. She walked up to him, gently touched his arm and treated him like a human being. That one small act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Because the broken-looking stranger they had just humiliated, the man they wanted thrown out like garbage, was the exact billionaire CEO they had all come to impress. And when he stepped onto that stage and revealed who he truly was, the silence that fell over that room was deafening. Every arrogant face that had laughed at him moments before turned white with shame. But it was already too late. Hello family, and welcome back to Tales That Teach Africa, where every story carries a lesson that will stay with you long after the video ends. If you are new here, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And for my loyal family already here, drop a like right now, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and let's get right into the story. The Grand Pinnacle Hotel stood like a golden fortress against the dark Atlanta skyline. Luxury cars lined the entrance in a slow, deliberate parade, black SUVs with tinted windows, Rolls-Royces that gleamed under the chandelier lights spilling from the lobby. Every arrival was a statement, every outfit a carefully chosen weapon. Inside, the grand ballroom had been transformed into something almost unreal. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting a warm honeyed glow across marble floors, so polished they reflected every designer heel that clicked across them. Long tables draped in white linen held towers of champagne glasses, exotic hors d'oeuvres arranged like tiny works of art, and centerpieces of deep red roses and gold leaf that probably cost more than most people's rent. But beneath all that beauty, something else filled the room. Hunger, not the kind that food could satisfy. This was ambition, raw and barely disguised behind polished smiles and expensive cologne. Tonight was not just another charity gala. Tonight was the night Kenneth Martins, the elusive black billionaire CEO who had taken the business world by storm, would make his first public appearance. No interviews, no press photos, no social media presence, just a name that had dominated headlines and boardroom whispers for over a year. And now, for the first time, he would be in the same room as them. Everyone wanted a piece of him. Near the bar, a group of men in tailored suits spoke in low, calculated tones. 2 minutes, that is all I need with him. Just 2 minutes and I can pitch the entire deal. Across the room, a cluster of women in floor-length gowns adjusted their jewelry and exchanged knowing glances. He is young, single, and worth billions. Let us not pretend we are here for the auction. Soft laughter followed, sharp and deliberate. But not everyone in that room was there to hunt. Near the back, moving quietly between tables with a tray of champagne glasses balanced perfectly on one hand, was Mercy Williams. She wore the standard uniform, a crisp white long-sleeve shirt, a fitted black vest and dark slacks. Her hair was pulled back neatly into a low bun, not a strand out of place. Her posture was straight, her movements smooth and practiced, her expression calm and focused. She was not thinking about billionaires. She was thinking about the electricity bill sitting on her kitchen counter. She was thinking about her younger sister's school fees that were due in 9 days. She was thinking about finishing this shift without a single complaint from the event coordinator, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Okafor, who had already snapped at 2 servers before the first guest even arrived. Mercy, Mrs. Okafor hissed from across the floor, eyes like a hawk. Table 7 is empty. Move. Yes, ma'am, Mercy replied without hesitation, adjusting her tray and gliding forward. She had learned a long time ago that in rooms like this, people like her were meant to be invisible. And most nights, she was perfectly fine with that. Tonight, however, would be different. Near the entrance, the head of security, a tall, composed man named Victor Osai, pressed one finger to his earpiece and listened. His expression did not change, but his posture shifted slightly. Alert, ready. He is close, a voice crackled through the comm. Victor gave a single nod to his team. Positions, and remember, no one interferes unless I give the word. One of the younger guards frowned. Even if something happens. Victor's eyes stayed locked on the grand double doors, especially then. Inside the ballroom, the energy was tightening. Conversations grew shorter. Eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. Glasses were held but not sipped. Smiles were sharpened like blades, ready to be deployed at the perfect moment. Then the doors opened. The entire room seemed to inhale at once. But what stepped through those doors was not what anyone expected. A man entered slowly, thin, worn down. His brown suit was filthy, torn at the sleeves, stained across the chest. His shirt underneath was wrinkled and partially unbuttoned. His shoes were cracked and barely holding together. His hair was a rough, unkempt afro, and his beard was patchy and uneven, as though grooming had become a forgotten luxury long ago. His face told a story no one in that room wanted to read. Angular features, slightly sunken cheeks, deep-set eyes that carried a weight far heavier than exhaustion. He stood just inside the doorway, shoulders slightly slouched but not broken, hands resting at his sides with a strange, unsettling calm. He looked like a man life had chewed up and spat onto the marble floor of a world that was never meant for him. The shift in the room was immediate. "What in the world?" someone whispered sharply. A woman in a silver gown physically stepped backward, clutching her handbag closer to her body as though the man might lunge for it. A man near the bar let out a short, disgusted laugh and shook his head. How did he even get past the door? "Security," another voice called out, louder now, laced with irritation. "Can someone handle this?" But security did not move. Victor Osai stood like a statue near the wall, watching, saying nothing. The man in the torn brown suit took another slow step forward. Then another. His deep-set eyes moved across the room quietly, carefully absorbing every reaction, every turned back, every whispered insult, as though he were cataloguing each one. Then he spoke. His voice was low, calm, and steady despite the open hostility pressing in from every direction. "Please, I do not mean to cause any trouble, I just need a little help. Money for medication, I will leave right after." Silence followed, not the kind born from sympathy, but the kind that comes right before cruelty finds its voice. And across the room, standing perfectly still near table 7 with a tray of champagne glasses trembling slightly in her hands, Mercy Williams watched him. Not with disgust, not with judgment. With something else entirely. The silence did not last long. It never does when people with power smell weakness. A tall man in a midnight blue suit stepped forward first, swirling his glass of red wine with a lazy confidence. He looked the stranger up and down the way a person examines something stuck to the bottom of their shoe. "You have got some nerve walking in here like this," he said, his voice loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "This is a private event, not a homeless shelter." A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Heads nodded. A few people chuckled, emboldened now that someone had said what they were all thinking. The man in the torn brown suit did not flinch. He stood still, his deep-set eyes absorbing every word, his expression blank but intensely aware. His hands remained at his sides, his posture did not change, he simply watched. But the crowd was not finished. A woman draped in emerald green silk turned to her companion and said, loud enough to be heard 3 tables away, "This is exactly why these events need better screening. Anyone can just walk in off the street now, apparently." Her companion laughed. "Careful, stand too close and you might catch something." More laughter, louder this time, less restrained. Then it got worse. The man in the blue suit stepped closer, and with a deliberate flick of his wrist tilted his wine glass. Red droplets splashed across the stranger's already stained jacket. A few gasps followed, but not of sympathy, of amusement. "Oops," the man said flatly, smirking. "Looks like I improved your outfit." The stranger looked down at the fresh stains spreading across the torn fabric. Then he looked back up, still calm, still watching. His jaw tightened just slightly, the only crack in an otherwise unreadable expression, but he said nothing. Someone near the bar muttered, "Just throw him out already. This is embarrassing." Another voice added, "Get a job, brother. This is not a charity case. A man in a grey pinstripe suit walked past and deliberately bumped the stranger's shoulder, hard enough to shift his footing. No apology, not even a glance back. And through all of it, not a single person in that glittering room offered him help. Not a glass of water, not a kind word, not even basic acknowledgement that he was a human being standing in front of them asking for something as simple as medication. Near the back of the ballroom, Mercy had gone completely still. Her tray hovered in her hands, forgotten. Her chest was tight, her pulse pressing against her temples. "Do not get involved," another waitress whispered beside her, barely moving her lips. "You will lose your job." Mercy heard her, she understood the warning. She had bills to pay, a sister to take care of, a life that could not afford even one mistake. But her eyes kept returning to the man in the torn brown suit. And something deep inside her, something older than logic, stronger than fear, was already making a decision her mind had not yet caught up with. Mercy set her tray down. She did not think about it the way people think about decisions that change their lives. There was no dramatic internal monologue, no weighing of consequences. Her body simply moved before her mind could talk her out of it. She stepped away from the service wall and walked forward. Not quickly, not hesitantly, but with a quiet, steady purpose that cut through the noise of the ballroom like a blade through silk. A few guests noticed her immediately. A waitress moving out of position was unusual enough to draw glances. But Mercy did not look at any of them. Her eyes were fixed on the man in the torn brown suit, still standing in the same spot where the world had just tried to reduce him to nothing. He was looking at the floor now. Not in defeat, but in the way a person looks away when they are holding something inside that they refuse to let the world see. "Sir," Mercy said gently as she reached him, her voice low but clear enough that he lifted his gaze to meet hers. Up close the details were sharper, the torn sleeves, the stains on his shirt, the rough, patchy beard, the deep-set eyes that carried something far heavier than hunger, but also the steadiness in his posture, the quiet discipline in his stillness. Something about this man did not match the story his clothes were telling. She did not have time to figure out why. "Come with me," she said softly. A nearby guest let out a sharp laugh. "You cannot be serious right now." Mercy did not acknowledge him. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand gently on the stranger's arm. The touch was light, almost careful, not forceful, not performative, just human. The room seemed to hold its breath. The man looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back at her face. For the first time since he had walked through those doors, something shifted in his expression. Surprise, quiet and genuine. "You do not have to do this," he said, his voice low. Mercy met his eyes without flinching. "I know," she replied, "come on." She guided him away from the center of the ballroom, her hand still resting lightly on his arm, steering him past the stairs, past the whispers, past the judgment that pressed in from every polished corner of the room. "Mercy," Mrs. Okafor's voice cut through the air like a whip. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" Mercy did not stop walking. "I will handle it, ma'am," she said calmly without turning around. She led him through a side corridor where the noise of the gala softened and the air felt easier to breathe. The clatter of kitchen dishes replaced the sharp laughter of the elite. It was not glamorous back here, but it was safe. She pulled out a chair near the service entrance and looked at him. "Sit," she said gently, "please." And for the first time that night, someone had treated him like he mattered. Kenneth sat quietly for a moment, watching Mercy move through the small kitchen space with calm efficiency. She returned with a plate of warm food, not leftovers, and a clean glass of water, placing both in front of him without ceremony. "Eat slowly," she said. "You will feel sick if you rush." He looked at the plate, then at her. Something passed across his face, quiet and unreadable. Then he picked up the fork and ate carefully, exactly as she had advised. When he finished, Mercy reached into her apron pocket. She hesitated for just a second, long enough to feel the weight of what she was about to give away, then pulled out a folded bill and placed it on the table near his hand. "It is not much," she said, $50, but it should help with your medication." Kenneth stared at the money. Then he looked up at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You do not even know me," he said. "I do not need to," Mercy replied simply. He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said, and there was something behind those two words that felt heavier than gratitude. He stood, gave her a respectful nod, and walked out through the service corridor without another word. Mercy exhaled quietly, picked up the empty plate and returned to work. She did not expect to see him again. 20 minutes later, the energy inside the ballroom shifted like a change in weather. Conversations dipped, heads turned toward the entrance. The music softened as if the room itself was making space for something important. The grand doors opened again. This time there was no confusion. A man stepped through and the room responded instantly. He wore a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit that moved with him like a second skin. His shoes caught the chandelier light with a quiet gleam. A silver watch sat on his wrist, understated but unmistakable. His beard was now clean and sharp. His hair was fresh and precisely lined. His posture was straight, commanding, effortless. Kenneth Martins, the real entrance. The transformation was so complete that not a single person in that ballroom connected the man standing before them now with the broken stranger they had humiliated less than half an hour ago. And just like that, the wolves descended. Mr. Martins, what an absolute honour. I have been looking forward to this evening. Kenneth, if I may, I have a proposal that I believe will interest you greatly. Mr. Martins, welcome to Atlanta. We are so thrilled you chose our city. Hands extended from every direction. Smiles stretched wide. Voices dripped with rehearsed charm and desperate warmth. The very same people who had spilled wine on him, who had laughed in his face, who had called him an embarrassment, now crowded around him as though he were the sun and they had been living in darkness. Kenneth acknowledged them with brief nods and measured handshakes, his expression polite but unreadable. But his eyes were already searching the room. Looking for her. Kenneth circulated through the room for several minutes, shaking hands, accepting compliments, letting them perform. He gave just enough to keep them talking, but never more than they deserved. A nod here, a brief reply there, nothing wasted. Then, without announcement, he caught Victor's eye from across the room and gave a single subtle signal. It was time. Victor moved toward the stage and spoke quietly to the band. The music softened, then faded completely. A hush rolled across the ballroom like a slow wave, pulling every conversation under. Ladies and gentlemen, Victor announced, his deep voice cutting cleanly through the silence. May I have your attention, please? Every eye turned, everybody angled toward the stage, smiles were refreshed, postures straightened. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the speech, the opportunity, the golden window. Kenneth stepped onto the stage with the same calm, deliberate energy he had carried all night. He stood behind the microphone and looked out across the room, not with admiration, not with gratitude, with recognition. The silence deepened. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began, his voice steady and unhurried. It is clear a great deal of effort went into making this evening impressive. A few satisfied nods rippled through the crowd. Someone raised a glass slightly. But Kenneth did not smile. In fact, he continued, I have already had a very revealing experience this evening. The shift was subtle but immediate, a slight tightening in the air, a few exchanged glances. Before I arrived the way you see me now, Kenneth said, adjusting his cuff with quiet precision, I entered this room a different way. He paused, letting the silence press down on them. I walked through those same doors wearing a torn brown suit, dirty shoes, an unkempt beard. I looked like a man the world had forgotten. And I asked very simply for help. Money for medication, nothing more. The colour began to drain from faces across the room. Smiles dissolved. A glass trembled slightly in someone's hand. I was ignored, Kenneth said. I was insulted. I was laughed at. Wine was poured on my jacket. His eyes moved slowly, deliberately from face to face. I was told to get a job. I was told I did not belong here. Someone bumped me hard enough to knock me off balance and did not even look back. No one moved, no one breathed. You see, Kenneth continued, his voice dropping lower but somehow carrying even further, it is easy to show respect when you already know someone has power. When their name carries weight. When being kind to them benefits you. He let that settle. But character, he said, is revealed in how you treat someone who appears to have nothing to offer you. His gaze swept the room one final time. And tonight, almost every single one of you failed that test. The words landed like stones dropped into still water, heavy, inescapable, final. And then his expression softened just slightly. Almost, he repeated quietly, except one. Kenneth's gaze lifted from the frozen faces before him and travelled slowly toward the back of the ballroom. Every head turned instinctively, following his line of sight like iron filings drawn to a magnet. And there, standing near the service entrance with a tray still balanced in her hands, was Mercy Williams. She had gone completely still. Her heart pounded against her ribs. The air around her seemed to thicken as dozens of eyes landed on her at once, eyes that had never truly seen her before this moment. "That young woman," Kenneth said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "was the only person here tonight who treated me like a human being." Mercy's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to disappear, to step backward into the kitchen corridor and let the shadows swallow her whole. But there was nowhere to go, and Kenneth was not finished. "She did not know who I was," he continued. "She had no reason to believe helping me would benefit her in any way. In fact, helping me could have cost her this job." A few staff members glanced nervously toward Mrs. Okafor, who stood frozen near the bar, her face unreadable. "But she helped anyway," Kenneth said. "She guided me away from your cruelty. She fed me. She gave me money from her own pocket, $50 she probably could not afford to lose." He paused, letting the weight of that settle over the room like a heavy cloth. "In a room full of millionaires," he said slowly, "the person with the least gave the most." No one spoke. No one moved. The shame was almost visible now, pressing down on shoulders, tightening jaws, forcing eyes to the floor. Kenneth stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted before him without a word, bodies shifting aside as though pulled by invisible strings. He walked with the same calm, deliberate pace he had carried all night, his eyes fixed on one person and one person only. Mercy's hands trembled slightly around the tray. She lowered it slowly, unsure what to do with herself, unsure what any of this meant. He stopped in front of her. Up close she could see it now, the same calm, steady presence she had noticed in the broken stranger. The same deep-set eyes, the same quiet intensity. It had been him all along. "You saw me," Kenneth said softly, his voice meant only for her now, when no one else did. Mercy swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did not know it was you." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I know," he replied. "That is exactly why it mattered." Behind them, the ballroom remained frozen. The elite stood in their designer gowns and tailored suits, stripped of their arrogance, drowning in a silence heavier than any judgment they had ever passed. But Kenneth did not look back at them. He had already found what he came for. The kitchen corridor felt smaller now, quieter, as though the walls themselves understood that something significant was unfolding. The distant clatter of dishes had softened. The muffled noise of the gala seemed to belong to another world entirely. Mercy stood near the same chair where she had asked him to sit just an hour ago. Her hands were empty now, the tray abandoned somewhere behind her. She was acutely aware of everything, her simple uniform, the loose strand of hair escaping her bun, the vast distance between her reality and his. Kenneth stood a few feet away, giving her space. He did not rush to fill the silence. He simply watched her with those deep-set eyes that seemed to carry far more than exhaustion now. They carried understanding. "You must think I am crazy," he said finally, a faint trace of warmth in his voice. "Walking into a place like that dressed like a broken man." Mercy shook her head slowly. "I think you were looking for something." "I was," he admitted. "I have been looking for a long time." He took a small step closer, not intrusive, just present. "When you build everything from nothing," he continued, his voice quieter now, more personal, "you learn quickly that success attracts people. But it rarely attracts the right ones." Mercy listened without interrupting. There was a heaviness beneath his words, the kind that comes from years of disappointment carefully folded away. "Everyone wants something from me," Kenneth said. "A deal, a connection, a piece of whatever they think I represent. After a while you stop seeing faces, you only see intentions." He paused, his jaw tightening slightly. "I got tired," he admitted, tired of the performance, tired of wondering if anyone would still see me if I had nothing to offer them. Mercy felt something shift in her chest, not pity, recognition. "So you tested them," she said softly. "I tested them," he confirmed, "and they failed, all of them." His eyes met hers directly now. "Except you." Mercy looked down briefly, uncomfortable with the weight of his gaze. I was just doing what felt right, she said. I did not do it for anything. I know, Kenneth replied. That is what makes it matter. A beat of silence passed between them, but it was not awkward. It was grounded, real. Kenneth reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple card. No flashy design, just his name, a number, and an email address. He placed it gently on the counter between them. I am not asking for anything tonight, he said, but I would like to know you, the real you, not the version you show to survive places like this. Mercy looked at the card, then back at him. And if I am not what you expect? She asked quietly. Kenneth's expression softened just barely. Then I will adjust my expectations, he said simply. Mercy studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and picked up the card. I will think about it, she said. That is all I am asking. Mercy did not call him that night or the next. Life did not pause simply because something extraordinary had happened. The morning after the gala, she still woke up early, still checked her bills, still tied her hair back the same way before heading into another shift. The card sat on her small kitchen table, untouched but never forgotten. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. That is her, the waitress from the gala, the one the billionaire called out. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with barely concealed envy. A few suddenly treated her with a respect they had never shown before. Mercy noticed, but she did not let it change her. 3 days later, after a long shift and an even longer moment of staring at that card, she finally picked up her phone. Her finger hovered over the screen, then she dialed. It rang only once. Mercy, Kenneth's voice came through, warm and unhurried. I was hoping you would call. She almost smiled. You saved my number already. I saved it the moment I left that kitchen. There was a pause, but it was not awkward. It was the beginning of something honest. Are you busy? He asked. I just got off work. Good, then let me take you to dinner. That first dinner was nothing like she expected. No private jets, no 5-star restaurants with menus she could not pronounce. Kenneth chose a small, quiet place on the outskirts of the city, warm lighting, simple food, real conversation. He asked about her life, and he listened without interrupting. She told him about her younger sister, about the jobs she had worked to keep things steady, about the father who left and the mother who stayed until she could not anymore. Kenneth did not respond with pity. He responded with understanding, not because their lives had been the same, but because he recognized the discipline it took to survive without shortcuts. And when he spoke about himself, it was not the version the world saw. It was the truth, the long nights, the rejection, the loneliness that success could not fix. From that night on, something steady began to grow, not rushed, not forced, real. Kenneth did not try to pull her out of her world overnight. He stepped into it first, picking her up after shifts, walking with her through neighborhoods she knew by heart, sitting with her in spaces where his name meant nothing. And Mercy did not lose herself in his world either. When she stepped into it, she did so on her own terms, observing, questioning, learning. He respected that. More than that, he needed it. Months passed, then a year. Mercy went back to school, something she had delayed for too long. Kenneth supported her but never controlled her. She challenged him, kept him grounded, reminded him that success meant nothing without connection. When he proposed, it was not at a gala or in front of cameras. It was quiet, intentional, just like the moment they first met. Are you sure about this? Mercy asked, searching his face. I have been sure since the night you saw me when no one else did, he replied. She said yes. And so, from a single act of kindness in a room full of cruelty, 2 people who had spent their lives surviving finally found something worth building. Not wealth, not status. A foundation of truth. Hello family, that brings us to the end of today's story. If this touched your heart, do not forget to like, subscribe and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, how you treat people when you have nothing to gain reveals everything about who you truly are. Until next time, stay kind, stay blessed, and I will see you in the next one.